March 1st Ways and Means meeting. Please join me in your Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great.
John, is this anything special?
No, you can move it, just close it, push it out of the way.
Do we have any
Yeah, it's okay.
public participation? I see we have some public online, but no hands raised, so I'm assuming not. All right, very good. All right, we'll move on to the presentation of the budget overview. Come on up, we've got plenty of room. Oh, there's Megan. Very good.
Did we have a table or something? This looks long ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's okay, Whitney would like to start out with some of the housekeeping information on the online budgets, et cetera.
That'd be
et cetera.
excellent.
Yeah, just a couple notes on the budget and the website before they dig into the details. So, as you see in front of you, you have your FY '24 binders. Just a couple notes. There are some purposefully empty tabs at this point. In central admin, you just have the operating side. You don't have the accommodated yet. Debt service will also be empty, and other / negotiated settlements. So if those tabs are empty, that is not a mistake, that is on purpose. If another tab is empty, that is a mistake. So if you could let me know, and we can get that corrected, that'd be great. You also have in there, as always, your proposed FTE chart and your scorecard to date. Again, that's only the operating side. As of right now, we'll update those as the accommodateds get finalized. The website, actually, I emailed the instructions out a little bit ago, but I'm also passing out hard copies, just a refresher on how to get into the website and the login credentials. Again, if anyone has any issues getting in there, let me know, we can troubleshoot that. And I had someone other than John D. check the credentials today, so hopefully we won't have the hiccup that we had last year.
I did just log in, it worked.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. Oh, one other note. I just noticed about 20 minutes ago that a few of the cover sheets in the binders are now on the website. The heading was not updated from 23 to 24. So just so everyone knows, those are the correct numbers and information. It was just the heading wasn't updated. And I did not have enough time in 20 minutes to reload everything. And last thing, just thank you to the team that we had putting together all this stuff in a mad rush this afternoon. From my office, Sam, Jen, and Karen, and from the select board's office, Ellen and Kim. So I just want to publicly thank them for everything they did this afternoon. That's all I got.
Thanks, Whitney.
Right, thanks, Whitney.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Steve?
Will the scorecard be online? I don't see it.
Yes, I just put it there, so I may have not hit all the right
Publish.
buttons.
Okay.
I'll double check
I
that.
printed mine from there, so it should be up there.
Oh.
It was about the 5th item down. Although, I have, you, last year approved that. with the
Yes,
credential.
it probably is different.
Never mind.
Yeah, it may
Okay.
not have saved. I'll double check that.
Yeah, it's not 5 down, assessor or treasurer collector.
Oh, no, it's on the main page.
Oh. Yeah, I see it, thanks.
Okay, great.
All right, any other questions for Whitney? No? Good, okay.
All right, thanks, everybody. Usually we do the old drop and go. Whitney tells you what you have, and then we say, thank you, see you next week. But I just wanted to go over a few quick slides with you. I promise I won't keep Brad from seeing the Celtics. So just in summary, the budget that you have in front of you on the town operating is right at the guideline of 375. What we would call this probably level service light. What does that mean is that it has all the contractual increases in it for everybody. But what it's missing is sort of that inflationary factor for supplies and materials. So everybody came to us, and we tell them, here's the parameters around what you submit for your contractual things like heat and gas also, but try to keep the supplies and materials at the level that they're at now as best you can. Just because with the the collective bargaining agreements we just went through, and with so many people going through steps, we have a little bit higher than normal increase. So as far as the accommodated accounts or the undistributed accounts, everybody's used to those. We're not totally complete. We still have a few that we're fine tuning. We're tracking right as expected, which we talked about a little bit earlier in the season, that they were going to be higher this year, given that some of them the state has approved higher increases for things like special ed tuition, but we'll get into that. A few that we're still fine tuning is debt service. We have a meeting next week we have a borrowing that's coming up this April, so we'll finalize that. We'll be able to finalize the debt service. Employee benefits is always a big one, because we want to give Gary as much time to fine tune that and get it down as tight as he can. And non-member and member regional schools, we don't have anything from them yet. Given that they're changing governor, they just got their Chapter 70 last week. So I'm not making excuses for them like Paul thinks I am, but, so we'll shortly get that. And then the big one is special ed, tuition and transportation. That's gonna be the wild card this year. It's still being finalized. Anybody who's watched the school department meetings knows that that's one that they're really worried about. We could be talking about an increase in the teens, but we'll talk more about that in another slide. So just a quick snapshot of some, you'll see them on the scorecard, but some of the departments or cost centers were over the guideline. We usually like to just give a little quick reason why. The departments will come in and get in depth with both the subcommittee and this committee, but just to point out a few, some of them are just because they're smaller dollars that, a little increase. For example, a $43 increase in the Disability Access Committee is a 4.4% increase, and it's $7 over guideline. So historical, very similar, a couple $100 puts it $20 over guideline. The sealer you see there, that's quite a large increase. We've talked a little bit about how we have to change the way we provide that service. Some time ago, the state, about this time last year, the state told us that they were no longer going to provide that service to us. We were able to enter into an intermunicipal agreement with Lexington, that we share a part-time employee that performs those services for both towns. Why the big increase is because we want to at least cover the pay rate for that employee, our share of that employee in the operating budget, and then share and then use the revenue that we collect in the revolving account to cover any incidentals like the other cost of the employee of reimbursements for gas or mileage, and for any equipment the person may need, because this is a new position to us. We don't have the equipment from the old person to pass over. A couple others that are over guidelines but only submitted contractual collective bargaining agreements is accounting, 7.17%. That's basically everybody, all the employees moving through the steps, and then a transfer of one employee that's at the top step that came from the treasurer's office and took a position in the accounting office when an employee left us to go to the school. The employee that was working in the accounting office was a lower step, like a step 4. This person's been here quite a number of years. So again, it's a big percent increase, but it's only due to staff change. Board of Health, same thing. Is only collective bargaining agreements with steps. There's nothing else in there. Conservation is the same, collective bargaining plus a potential retirement notice that also kicks in some more dollars, so absent that, they would have been under guideline. Veteran service, same thing, small increase in supplies and materials, but collective bargaining agreement increases only. And then a couple others is the rec department, who is a little bit over guidelines, that really only includes a collective bargaining agreement, some increases to overtime and materials and supplies. And then fire, which is a big number, and fire will do a lot of talking about with their subcommittee, and when we come back here, we've got an issue with fire overtime this year, as we have in previous years. This year's been particularly bad. You know, we're working on that, on how we can clear that up, but this is to try to think, this is what we think the right size of the budget's gonna be, so it's quite a big increase in overtime, but other than that, there's no other real increases in that budget. So FTE headcount, we really just wanted to highlight which ones were over and why, and then sort of FTE. Good news is that there's no new FTEs requested. There's actually a decrease in headcount that we'll talk about a little bit, and the library will talk about you when they come in. There's a restructured, repurposed FTE, so it's an FTE neutral. There's a retirement in the treasurer collector's office of a longtime assistant collector. That position was in the bargaining unit and not a true assistant department head. Now trading that position for a true assistant department head of a deputy treasurer collector. So we have a treasurer collector, and then we used to have an assistant treasurer assistant collector that were both union employees. Now we have an administrative and professional that sort of adds to the structure in there and starts us to on the path of succession planning and getting that office with the right structure for now. That previous structure's been in place for 50 years. So it was a good timing on that. The structure of the sealer of weights we already talked about. We have a new part-time, so it adds to head count, but it's not it's a change in the way we operate. And then there are some reductions in head count at the library. I'll let Mike talk to his subcommittee and to you all on that. But he's making a structural change too, where he's, I'm not sure it's public yet, so I'll let Mike explain it to you.
It's not.
Okay, good, thanks for stopping me. Okay, accommodated accounts, a little bit more detail. We're not complete, as I said, but we're tracking right in line for what our target, the higher target than normal for this year, which we said would probably be between 7% and 9%. We usually try to shoot between 5% and 7%. The usual drivers are what they are. It's our OPEB plan that has existed for quite a while now, that we've got, year after year, we do 9.3% increase and contribute to that, and will be paid off at some point. Frank puts a stop to it. Middlesex retirement grows by about that amount, between 6% and 7%. There's an option that you can pay all at once and take a pretty significant discount, which Gary thinks we'll be able to do cash flow wise. So that gets us down to only increasing a little less than 7%. Debt service, that's probably going to come in between 7% and 10%, a little less than last year. But continues on our plan where we like to do is smooth out the debt service budget so that we don't have, flat for a couple of years and then a huge spike. We try to smooth it out and use that addition to pay down debt for that year. Waste removal, that if anybody's watched the select board meetings, that's been a topic we've been talking about quite a bit, including at town meeting approved for them to be able to go enter into a 5-year agreement. This is for year one, a significant increase. We've talked about it at town meeting that we had a great contract before. So this is sort of the catch-up. So it's, a couple $1 million. I think it's total about 3.3 million now. So it's up 36%. Health insurance, we're continuing to do great in our health insurance. The group that runs that, whatever we call it, the Health Insurance Advisory.
Employee Advisory Committee.
Employee Advisory Committee does a great job. Gary does a great job. Christine Sinicola. We expect that probably to be around the 4%. So that's great. That's better than most of our colleagues that we talk to that are seeing significant increases And we've been lucky enough that that's pretty standard for us the past few years. So that's great news. It's not finalized yet, but that's what we expect. And then the two open items that we talked about, the regional schools and then the special ed transportation and tuition, which the OSD, which is the state agency that governs what the rates that the private schools can charge, is allowing a 14% increase this year. They've had several years where they've had flat or frozen rates and are catching up in 1 year, even though, Dr. Conti would probably tell you that his group and the school committee's groups has lobbied hard to have him phase that increase in. But I think the private schools have just taken less than inflationary increases for a while now. And so that doesn't mean that line's gonna go up 14%, but it could. We're projecting it to go up a little less than that, but we'll finalize that with the school department when we can. So the bottom line, what does that all mean? We're looking at an estimated budget increase when the accommodators are done of between 5.2 to 5.5. That's the town and the school at 3.75. It's important to point out the school hasn't voted theirs. I think they just started their initial, so that could change. And then the accommodated, it looks like we're gonna land somewhere in the 7.7 or 8.5 range. If we're at the lower end, we're looking closer to 5.2, and at the higher end, we're looking closer to 5.5. What can we expect with that as a levy increase? That will probably translate into something like 5.4 to 5.65 levy increase. And so what's not in? So there's no new initiatives in it, there's no new positions in it, which we already talked about those. There's no real inflationary factor for stuff, supplies and materials. There is, we talked about what is, so what also isn't in there is the transportation and mobility coordination that was requested by the transportation committee some time ago. We're doing a communication study with the Collins Center right now that is likely to suggest that we need a communications person on staff or some sort of support in that area, or add some resources to that area. There's been some citizens that are looking at us to do something in the area of sustainability, and our affordable housing support evolves quite a bit recently, so there's no added resources for that area. And then, do you want to talk about the?
Sure. Just something that we've talked to you a little bit about, and we hope to get back to you in September. And hopefully, by telling you now, we won't hear that why wasn't this in May. But I think everybody's aware that we've got we applied for and received a grant for us to look at, do a compensation study of the A&P plan. I think we've talked to you on multiple occasions now where our pay as a community has sort of started to fall behind, and it's begun to impact our hiring and interest in our positions. So through Whitney's work with the state, we got some money to fund a compensation study for the A&P folks, and we'll be working on that over the summer and hope to come back to you with some sort of plan that will provide allow us to hopefully adjust a little bit closer to fair market value to help us retain and attract future department heads, assistant department heads. I will tell you, we've done a little bit of work in the recent contracts, but our collective bargaining folks also have fallen a little bit behind. We're having some serious trouble hiring CDL drivers, public health nurses, office staff. We used to get hundreds of applications for these jobs, and we're not getting quite the numbers as we used to. I think some of it relates to sort of the change in work environment. We're not really a work from home kind of place, which makes it, in this day and age now, there's a lot of candidates that just won't even entertain a job that isn't at least hybrid. So that continues to be a challenge for us, and that's something we'll be looking to address. And also, for the fall, with the committee support and town meeting support over the past few years, we've been able to restructure sort of the finance offices to a good structure with a pyramid and good efficiency and communication. We'd like to start looking at some of the other areas in town just to see if is a better structure that will provide better communication, better efficiency, as opposed to having all the individual departments be silos. So that's something for the fall that we hope to look at our land use function in departments. If you think of, building, conservation, planning, economic development and whatnot, we'd like to take a look at those just to see how we can structure that a little bit better. So just a little bit more of a preview of what we hope to talk to you about after town meeting.
I just want to make one more point on the AMP. The AMP is the only group that doesn't have an agreement for next year. There's money in the negotiated settlements for what we anticipate being agreement with the AMP group. We're pointing out that we're also doing the study because if something comes out of that study that says, half of the group is behind and we need to try to do something for that, that's something that isn't in the budget as of right now. But the increase of what we expect to settle with the AMP is covered in negotiated settlement.
I thought we had just approved an AMP plan at
1
town
year.
meeting for 1 year.
1 year.
This year.
Oh, for FY '23?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was on
It'll
my
always
ear.
be like that.
Yeah, it's a 1 year, a group that every year we approve something for them.
Any questions? Brett?
Thank you. So John, you must know, I say this every year, I hate to balance the budget on office supplies, and you said we're doing that very thing this year. So I understand the pressures on the budget. It doesn't, tell me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't look like the pressures we're concerned about this year aren't going away anytime soon. Certainly, having to bring salaries up across the board is a lifelong commitment. Garbage is not going to get any cheaper. Do you guys, have you all been thinking in terms of, I get the sense that perhaps the community likes the level of services, and if it costs a little bit more, plow right ahead, but if there is indeed pushback, is this something that can we use this as an opportunity to do, it sounds like you're already doing some reorganizations, but is there more large-scale reorganizations that you've perhaps talked about on a Friday afternoon, or are we within a few years of saying, well, maybe we can't support the level of services we have now?
I would just say intuitively, Brad, that there's actually more pressure to do more in terms of services and bodies than I think some of the members of the community that have been around for a while. I remember when I started with the town, I used to consider the town to be extremely frugal to a fault. And over the years, what we've noticed is that the desire for services and good services has sort of begun to outweigh the desire for a smaller tax bill. I can honestly tell you that based upon our level of services now, there's not a lot that you could do to impact where we are now. I mean, you're talking about getting rid of a department, and that may only have a negligible impact on taxes. I mean, that's where we are in terms of a critical mass of dollars. We're constantly thinking of ways, but it's not, there's a lot of small things, and they don't really add up to much for the taxpayer. So I think, as things get tighter going forward, I think we will have to have some conversations with the community in terms of, what do you want for a level of services? And I do agree that it appears to us anyway that people do value the level of services in town, and until we hear otherwise, I mean, we can do whatever the community wants to do in terms of molding that. But in my time here, I've never heard anyone want a service to go away, quite frankly. And we continually receive requests from residents to enhance or increase services on a regular basis. So a good example would just be, Select Board had quite a few conversations on trash, and there wasn't one person that came up here to show up at the meetings or the hearings that didn't want trash service to remain as it was. They didn't want to consider any options whatsoever. Every other week recycling, no. There were a couple of things that wouldn't have saved us a heck of a lot of money, but even for small money, and almost to a T, all the feedback we got through email and in person was to maintain the services the way they are, you know, despite what we're anticipating to be a very, very large increase. So if that's an example of just sort of recent history, I don't believe there was one person there that was comfortable on changing the way or pay-as-you-throw or anything different in terms of trash. Folks overwhelmingly came out and they wished to maintain the service the way it was. And quite frankly, I think if they could have asked for more service, I think that that would have been considered. But, you know, as with anything, we're always looking at the way we do things to try to reduce the cost of them and provide better services. But just going to be honest that there's no perfect scenario out there. 'Cause, I mean, you could just say, hey, you know, we don't need, Rob, don't get excited, we don't need a library anymore. It's, the impact actually overall on the taxpayers would really be negligible if you eliminated the library. So incrementally, we can do things, but like I say, we've heard overwhelmingly from citizens in most cases that want to continue to receive what they receive now for services.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the compensation study, so this is for the A and P admin and professional
Yep.
people. And so the way that has worked in the past is we typically match that to the current contractual increases roughly. Is that kind of?
So what the collective bargaining agreement?
Yeah, yeah, okay. And the study will be done by comparing Burlington to other communities, is that?
Yes.
And how do they, like, select the communities? Is it based on proximity? Is it based on similar size or tax base?
We haven't had that meeting yet, Mike, but what we try to do is try to compare to similar places, and we're not similar in many ways. So, you know, you want to have some comparisons to say, let's call it the Middlesex League communities that we compete against in sports. But this, you know, there'll also be there'll need to be comparisons to communities that have the large commercial sector that we have. You know, being a conservation director in a quiet little town that has no development is a much different job than what our conservation folks have to do with all the development being permitted here. And again, that's just an example. You know, police, fire, same thing. We have larger police and fire departments than maybe a community with similar population, just because of the highways running through town, the commercial district in town, the malls. So we'll try to do comparisons in a bunch of different ways. You know, there'll be some, again, I think there'll be some where we're more like city during the day and a town by night kind of thing. And, you know, we hope that we'll be able to hone in on those measures that make us most comparable to other places.
It almost seems like it should be done in cooperation with other towns, because let's say we compare to Peabody, right? And Burlington gets a grant and we go forward and we, you know, get this study done. And then, but we don't share that with Peabody. Peabody could be spending money doing a grant themselves when we could be working together, you know? I don't know if that's.
Mike, just want to add one thing on the comparative data. The firm that we're using will use about maybe a dozen or so communities, and they'll be both geographically and demographically correlated to Burlington. So there'll be a big enough group that will be the around here's, and also, you know, like Paul mentioned, some of that have a similar tax base and similar, and this group that we've hired to do it has done recently around here a few that we've been able to look at and see how they're done. So they do get shared, but
Okay, so you're leveraging some of the other work.
yeah, so you can kind of know what the deliverable you're going to get and what's going to come out of it, so you can see what their samples are. So when Whitney writes the RFP, when we hire somebody, they got to submit a sample to us and then go over their methodology on how they do it.
Okay.
And they can share if they were able to hire people more easily? That's the game, right? So they have that data to provide?
I don't know if they have data on whether that increased applications or, I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, it just makes sense. You have to be comparable to, you know, order to attract people, or you can't be paying lower than everybody else.
Sure.
Thank you.
Chris?
Speaking of comparison, so last year during the budget season, we raised just a typical fee of leveling a house from $500 to $1,000. Are we looking at what other towns are doing for our fees? So for example, Lexington, Bedford, they'll work, I think, during this, but they do by a square foot. And if we had changed to a square foot instead of flat fee, we could be making hundreds of thousands of dollars more. So are we looking at, rather than just going to our own citizens and having to pay out the taxes, looking at our fees and how we're using that for inspections and going out when we have new construction and seeing if we're comparable to the surrounding towns when it comes to the fee structures we have in place and bringing in revenue?
No, I think that's a great question, and fees is something that we look at on a regular basis, and the town's philosophy over the years is we don't want to be the cheapest, and we don't want to be the most expensive, we want to be somewhere in the middle. I know you're speaking about, I think, the demolition fee in particular. I will have you know that the rest of the building fees are based upon the square footage or the dollar amount of the work that's being done, so we'd have a hard time justifying the amount of money we get in building fees, so that's, I know the one you're talking about specifically, but I think the town's philosophy over the years has been to sort of be in the middle of the pack of our neighbors and sort of what we're charging for fees for our residents. Obviously, there are a lot of fees that we don't do. It's sort of been the town's philosophy to not have a trash fee, to not have a little fee for everything. We try to accomplish as much as we can under the residents' tax bill, but obviously, fees are definitely a lever that we can use to sort of, close some of these budgetary gaps, and we do review it quite frequently to try to make sure that we're hopefully at least keeping pace with our neighbors.
Okay, thank you.
Roger?
So this is great. It's good to see where you've gotten to, but it feels a little bit like you missed a step. In years past, we've had a briefing around how the guideline was set and the reason for getting it set that way. And Ways and Means had an opportunity to both ingest that and to vote on it. The process seems to have changed without us being aware of it, or at least without it being called out. I mean, seeing at this stage, it's like I'm sure there wasn't much detail that could be provided, but it does seem like a lot of this could have been known earlier about the general pressures on the budget. And it really looks like you're in a tough spot here, because I see the total number and I see, the causes of it. But I guess the selectmen got briefed, and I guess I didn't miss that.
Yeah, so it was just the chair and the vice chair that were at the meeting for I have the slides, I could put them up and, we could I could share them with you too, and then if you want to. But like you said, I think
Would that be of interest?
maybe it's,
Uh,
I mean,
Yeah,
it's retrospective, but.
Yeah, I think it would be useful to have that set of slides if you can you present that, or?
sure, I mean,
Yeah,
I have them, I don't know. We can talk about them.
I think it would be good for people to have that background. It's about a 15-minute show.
Well, if I could just, again, for perspective purposes, my understanding is how it's always been done is we sort of leave that meeting with 3 separate parties, and we'll go back and handle the select board. You guys will handle the Ways and Means, and the school committee folks that will be there will present to the school committee. So we'd be happy to present.
I'll take it up with my management.
Yeah, I think John would do an excellent job presenting that rather than me trying to represent it.
I was looking forward to that spreadsheet with 1,000 numbers on it. That was a highlight.
If I can make one other comment. So in terms of comparatives, I think every year, or at least every year in the town report, there's a couple of pages of comparing us to other towns, both in terms of tax rates and populations and a whole bunch of statistics. I'm assuming that when we do this A&P salary review, it'll cover most of the same towns. It's a pretty broad report. It's got like 20 towns on it. So there's already a lot of context for our comparatives.
The state has a bunch of tools that you can go and compare, and they'll give you what they say your comparative, it'll go by income, it'll go by tax base. So that's another tool you can use to see if you need a couple more cities or towns that the state thinks compare to us. So, I don't know, I'll try my best to do the whole presentation, but I won't, if I miss anything, just. So we usually start off, we kind of just say what the impacts of last year's guidelines are. So we kind of talk about what the residential rate, what the tax rates come out to be, what the average single family comes out to be, and what the value is, and what that increase looked like. So comparatively, in FY '23, in FY '22, the tax rate for residential was 9.95, it's now 9.4. CIP was 26.64, now it's 26.15. The average single family went up just under 10%, it went from just over 600,000 to 650,000, or just under 660,000. You can see what the average single family is there. That was an increase of about $221. That's pretty much in line with what the previous 5 years were. Going back, it was 264, 245, 199, 199.
And that's with the 2/3 shift commercial, residential.
Yes. We usually just show what the financial indicators are, what our free cash number was. We talked about this at January town meeting. Was certified at over 25 million. That's what the number was after the transfers from January. You can see the stabilization from the end of last year. That number fluctuates quite a bit during the year, but that was when we ended the year. And excess capacity, I know you all know, but for the millions of people watching at home, that's what is left untaxed after what's left on the levy that doesn't get taxed. So that number, which is typically around that, it's gone 10, 11, 12, 13 million. OPEB has about 13 million at the close of last year. Our goals are, you've seen this slide for at least as many years as I've been here, and some variation of it, but we always want to try to maintain the fees. These are sort of our guiding principles every year: prioritize investment in infrastructure. We want to minimize fees and be able to adjust for long-term liabilities. Assumptions and effects. We project modest increases to local receipts and state aid. So we continue to plan to use next year, our last year of $500,000 from ARPA as revenue replacement. But we're also able finally to add back some revenues as we start to recover from the pandemic. So that's a good sign for local receipts for us. State aid, we had a big bump last year with the change to Chapter 70. The governor's budget just recently came out. We're now just a little bit above minimum aid. So, a little bit less than before. We have a slide on that, though. We want to try to project realistic accommodated, which typically range 5 to 6. We already talked about that. We're projecting to be closer to 8 or 9. We want to set an operating budget increase of 3.75 and try to control the tax levy increase.
John, what was the budget increase over the last couple of years, just kind of for context? So 3.75 this year, and
So the operating or total budget?
the operating.
That's in the ballpark of what it's been the last few years, but I get back to you.
Okay.
I don't want to guess and be wrong. So operating budget, the budget drivers are stuff just costs more, and the utilities and fuel thing, everybody, it's the same as you feel in your pocket at home when you're heating your house and putting gas in your car. We feel it here the same way. Personnel costs going up a little bit for the new contracts. If we were to aim for level services, we'd probably be over 4, so that's why I call it level services light, because things like that aren't gonna make it is some of the costs for materials and supplies that we're gonna say, okay, we'll make it another year. And I hate to always talk about that, because we do talk with everybody and say, if it's really gonna be a problem, or this is gonna cause an issue for you, we'll figure it out, but let's try to be, where can we be a little bit more efficient for this? Mike, operating budgets the last 5 years averaged 3.65. If we would take out the COVID year, it's more like 3.8.
Just for reference, it was 3.5 for the town and 3.75 for school last year.
Okay.
So historically, the school has sort of been half point larger than the town. Last year it closed to a quarter extra, and this year it's the same for the guideline.
For accommodated, we did talk about this in the last slide, but just to point out, the 5-year average increase for accommodated is 5.21. So we've done much better over the last few years. If you were to take out the COVID cuts, it's more like 5.76. The normal budget drivers are what we talked about in the last set of slides. And the big ticket items this year are the trash and special ed that we talked about, that OSD approved a 1-year catch-up of a 7-year freeze, basically. But we'll continue to refine those and be done very soon. As far as the revenue side, local receipts, 5-year average is 0. But that's because we took a $2.1 million hit during the pandemic and decreased our budget by that. If you were to take that out and factor it in, it's more like a 3.6% increase over the years. Put that into perspective, it's about $16.1 million for 25. A little bit about them. We're, as I said, in local receipts, we're starting to make up for some of the COVID, the pandemic decreases. We're starting to see some of that climb back up. The hotel is climbing a little bit better than we thought, but did not where it needed to be. The meals tax and building permits have outpaced, they're pretty much back to what they were. They've even outpaced our projections. In fact, last year was the most building permits, given that we had some big ticket items that we've ever had, most dollars. In, all right, so what was state aid? Sorry, a little disorganized, wasn't prepared for this one, but 5-year average, 6%. That takes into account the big formula change last year where Chapter 70 went up by $1 million. So if you were to take that out, that's more like a 3% increase. It says the governor typically releases, we usually get that in January from a governor because there was a new administration. It comes out in March, came out last week, and we're more like a minimum aid district. What does that mean? It's a minimum aid district is your Chapter 70s held, they go through the formula, and if that formula doesn't produce at least, say, $30 per student, they set that, whatever it is, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 60, increase, then they hold you harmless and you get at least that increase. So if you got 10,000, 10 million 1 year, and your projections say you're gonna get less than 10.4 million, then you get at least minimum aid.
So we know that's all for schools primarily?
I'm sorry?
Chapter 70, yeah.
That Chapter 70 is primarily schools?
Chapter 70 is school. So state aid consists of a few different things. 2 big lines are Chapter 70, which is a formula used based on your school population, and then unrestricted government aid, which is what they used to call like lottery
Right.
money.
And it's flat, the Chapter 70, we know that now?
In the governor's budget, which is, well, normally I would say is the high water mark, but the last couple of years has been a little bit different. In a non-election year, the governor's budget's usually the high water mark for Chapter 70, and it doesn't go up. On election year, typically when it gets to the legislation, it goes up a little bit, because more people are running for office. But it's we projected 3% in our initial budget projection. We're about 100,000 less than that in what we have now. But we like to use the latest with what we're talking about, so. So then what else? So we talk about everything we're gonna spend, and then how do you pay for it? You have your state aid, you have your local receipts, and then everything else goes on the levy. So our last average for the last 4 years has been 4.7, 5 years is 4.76. If you were to take out the COVID cuts, it's more like 5%. So projecting, we were at this point projected to be potentially as high as 5.75, which is a little bit higher than what our target range that we usually shoot for is more like 4.5 to 5.5. But we're a little higher than that. We could potentially be down in that range when we're all said and done, but this was, whatever, a month and a half ago. And then just what the recommendation from the administration was to the Budget Summit group. You know, sort of just an illustration of if accommodated came in at that percent and the two school and towns were at that percent, what did we expect the levy to be? Right,
If I may,
I
Mr.
know I
Chairman.
went pretty fast. so-
No, that's okay. I want to, well, it's still warm here. So the 575 you're projecting, that's after all the offsets from like opera money,
Correct.
right? So that's really the levy, the tax.
Yeah. We
Raise that
expect it's gonna be a
appropriate.
little bit lower than that because we're not gonna wind up. as high
So
as
all
that.
the offsets have been applied and you came up with that number. I guess what's puzzling me a little bit is the recommendation you're coming in with for the 375 for operating budget. How did you arrive at that, given that you didn't have the budget submitted yet?
So again, so what we typically do is, you know, there's a revenue exercise you do. You say, okay, this is what we're projecting for revenues. We think we're gonna get this much for
Right.
state aid, we're gonna get this much for local receipts, and we want our levy to land in this area,
Right,
and that's our
Well, the
sort of
expen-
pie. Now, what, we take out the accommodated, and what's left,
right.
how do we split
But
that?
what that says is the expense side has to fit into that, as opposed to you've got the expense side and the revenue side, and you project the levy. You don't have the expense side. So all these budgets that we're gonna be reviewing, the ones that are in your domain, you've reviewed all of those, and you think that they all come in at a number that's good enough to hold the 375. And you've tried to highlight the things that might fall outside of that could drive it above the 375? Or you're saying even with all those drivers, we're still in there?
Say for the town operating, that, including what we talked about, that's still in the 375.
Okay.
So when we sit at the budget summit, we talk about, here's the guiding principles, we wanna maintain level service where we can, and we expect to keep in the range of the levy to be here. We expect accommodated to cost this much, and now this is how much we have left, what does that translate into a budget? And then we talk about that, and at that meeting, both sides, you know, the town and the school both said that 375 probably isn't gonna cut it, but we're gonna
Try.
do the best we can to get under that number.
So now we're in the figure out what the best we can is.
But just to be clear, we always set the guidelines before we know what the budget is.
No, I'm not, I'm not fighting that one. You gotta
need to go
start
get it.
somewhere, okay? What I'm trying to figure out, I think, I think the constraint parameters may be more difficult this time around than they've been in recent history because of a number of things, not the least of which is inflation, contractual obligations, salaries that went on. So I think we're in a tighter box, and I'm just trying to understand how we should deal with that on a department by department basis, outside of the ones that you've already at least taken your best shot with them to make it fit.
In a typical year, we don't have the 14% of special ed or the trash.
Right,
36%, so we're,
right.
you know, so during the year when everybody has to tighten the belt, that's why, that's what our conversation was, that
Yeah.
we're,
I just don't know if, and normally, sometimes at least, we've voted on the guidelines as a committee. That doesn't seem to be what we'll do this time.
Oftentimes, up until now, there's usually been three choices, and
Right.
one has
So-
been circled, and I
All right.
think they're drawing a harder circle around the circle now.
Right, so just from my perspective, the budgets that David and I have, Town Hall 1, I think the assessors budget is outside of your direct control, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not sure there are any more. So, you know,
Well, library and rec,
Library.
but that's not in town. I'm just looking, I'm being very selfish here.
Oh.
So our job's probably
Of
not
your
gonna be
budget.
too tough, but some of these could be much more difficult, like rec or
Well,
whatever.
they're all included in us meeting the 375, all departments.
I see, okay. Let me, do you mind if I just get rid of my questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'd be delighted to hear your questions.
He's being very generous. I'll pay for this later, I'm sure. Let's see, first of all, on the police side, we've had this running we wanted to fill so many positions every year to get them up to what was full manning. I think we're there now. We're not.
Down one,
And is that, but that's not in this budget.
no.
Okay, so we're still, and I think it was like 6 or 9. We've done quite a few,
It was 5 over 5 years.
5
We
over
got to
5
4.
years. Okay, so we're down 1 there, and you've met with them. They're willing to accept that. You'll see that, and whoever has police. DPW, which is a huge budget. I mean, I think it may be, as a department, the biggest one that you have, if I'm not mistaken. So nothing special came up there that you had to get out a sledgehammer and drive down this one to pay for that one? And
Again, we met with all the departments, including the elected ones, and everybody sort of understood the circumstances. The guideline was a tough guideline for us, but I'm here to tell you that it's a very generous guideline, albeit it's a tough guideline for us. So,
Right.
you know, we can't lose sight of the fact that a 375 operating budget with most of the budget busters pulled out of departments' budgets and included in accommodated accounts, we
Right.
have to still consider that to be a very generous guideline. You know, and again, I wish, I've had the opportunity to work in other communities earlier in my career, and I know John has as well, and Whitney. Communities would kill for a 375 operating budget guideline, quite frankly. And so we try to be respectful of the overall picture. The taxpayers and the residents and town meeting and Ways and Means are very good to us. They provide us with the services that we need to run the town very well, very generously, and we always want to be respectful of that. We're not just going to come in and say,
Right.
hey, it's a bad budget year for trash. We need trash in, we need 5% operatings, and it's a 10% levy. You're never going to get that from us. So-
I'm actually not pushing back. I just want to make sure that we as a body understand coming in what the table looks like, you know, what the conditions were coming in, because we may have some difficult decisions to make.
Just to add that you will all hear from the department heads that they've had
Oh,
to
yeah,
make some difficult
I'm sure we
decisions
will.
to get to where we are.
And my last question was, on the 39B, which is all the health insurance, right? That's the retiree and the actives and Medicare is all in that? And that 4% is all of that?
That is just health insurance that I'm talking about. Oh, it's just employee benefits, not Medicare is a different line.
Different line, yeah.
Not Medicare, but the health insurance is both the actives and the retiree for
Yeah.
this fiscal year, and it's a 4% tag that we probably feel that we're fairly close on that.
And that's the
Not quite
Medicare
done.
plans as well, if that's what you mean. Medicare tax on
Yes.
existing employees is a different line. So-
Right,
And it
right.
does include all employee health insurance and other
Right,
benefits.
okay, that's great. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think, Brad brought up a good point. There is definitely pressure to balance it on the non-salary items, because typically, if headcounts remain the same, which they have pretty much over the last few years, the total salary line, which includes, all the COLA steps and negotiated increases and so on, goes up just shy of 5%. So if the budget's only going up 3.75 on average, and the salary line item's going up roughly 5 in total, obviously, the delta is made up by something else going up less than that, 3.75. So at some point, we're going to see all the other non-salary items go to zero, and, we'll have a problem. So it'll be interesting to hear when you tell us that is starting to happen. It clearly has to happen at some point, or the salaries can't keep going up at that 5% rate. So we have a day of reckoning coming at some point here. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just as a point of clarification, so I think the part that was missed was the discussion of the three choices and the delta. Gentlemen, I assume and Whitney, sorry, I assume there's a delta that you'll still massage through as the budget process happens. We would normally see that there's a number that, as we figure out what receipts are and what accommodated is and what the shortfall will be, and then we pull all of that together and the budget levels out as we get toward May. Is that part?
Yeah, we sort of deviated from that several years ago because we were getting to a situation where, I think you guys remember, where we used to sort of set the budget guidelines where they put us in a deficit and say we're
Yes.
gonna work that deficit down.
The bad number could be as bad as the deficit of
At
8
the
million
time-
or whatever, and the good number was a deficit of like 600,000.
Yeah, I was the
We
town
went with it,
accountant at
right?
the time, and that deficit kept
It used to
getting
make you
bigger
sweat, I know, but I,
time, and we were always able to close the gap through, good
Right.
fortune and various things. But several years ago, we sort of just changed the way we looked at it. So let's go into this thing with a balanced budget and figure out where we want the levy to end up, where we want the budget to end up, as opposed to that.
that,
I don't know what you guys called it, but that's how
like
we used to
to
do
call
it.
it a delta, Paul. A little bit of a differential in
We
there.
used to basically
Yeah.
vote guidelines
I missed those.
that started us out in a deficit, and then we would try to work our way out of the deficit.
But you did start it with very, very conservative estimates
Right.
out of the gate, right?
Right.
Yep.
So,
And we
okay.
do that to a degree, because we see what the consensus revenue number's gonna be, and then we
Right.
say, okay, we can push this can go up if the expenses don't fit in there, but this is kind of the target. So we do a version of that,
That's my, so I guess that's my question.
and I will
because
say
if-
it still starts with a negative number.
Yeah,
Makes me not feel great.
because until you know the exact state aid numbers and things like that, it is a level of, there's an assumption being made that it'll be done, right? So I think that part. But I think really for, what did you say, John, the 10,000 people watching at home? But I just, so I think for those people,
He meant 10.
yeah, I do wanna reiterate that, first of all, there was a meeting that discussed guidelines, right? It's just that I think Ways and Means missed the part of, we liked to hear those variations, but there was certainly a meeting to discuss some options, I assume amongst the department, or rather, someone from the select board, someone from the school committee, your department heads, as well as Ways and Means heads, correct? Yes. So then, I just want to reiterate, I guess, for everybody watching, that what Paul said is very true. We find it so hard because we've been doing this for so many years in Burlington, but other communities sometimes are getting, cuts in their budget, meaning people have to be cut because they don't have that ability to even come up 3.75. So I prefer to look at this, it's tighter than we're used to, but I prefer to look at it as we're still on the fortunate side of the game, because a lot of communities aren't able to even talk about level funding, much less being able to hold our, the services we provide to our residents. The thing that I think we've talked about, I feel like Doug and I talked about it before, Brad's talked about it before with funding things and how much you want to continue to give services to the community. I know we talked about it on the select board a lot in years past. I think that's a true discussion, because that's really where the money is either saved or not saved. Are we a community that's never going to impose fees? I believe that's been Burlington's sweet spot for a long time. It's where we shine by comparison, to other communities. I think because of the commercial base that we have and the money that is brought in from that, we believe we give our residents that ability to not have fees. And if in fact that's what it means, that we're not imposing fees for people, then I think there comes a point where we have to say as a community, if we're gonna continue to deliver services, then maybe we do have to be able to direct the administration that we are okay with a 5% increase, which means the levy is gonna go up further. Everybody relax, I'm not saying it today, I'm just saying it in general. I'm saying
The
that,
selectmen will be calling you any minute.
oh no, that their phone numbers are the ones that are on the website, so I know that story from before. But I'm just trying to deliver a message that I think we've been drip campaigning for a long time as a community, or really as a Ways and Means, in that, there is gonna come a point where we're gonna be having this conversation, which is, we're either tight and we're level funding certain things, or we are willing as a committee to say we're gonna up the ante to deliver services. I mean, I think this might be the year where it starts to feel a little uncomfortable. Decisions have to be made on how you wanna take it, not for this year, but, in years subsequent.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's really a good summary. I mean, we can take direction from the residents and the committees and town meeting in terms of, you know, what do you want the spending level to be? What do you want your tax bill to be? As Sonia pointed out on the fees, there's a lot of money out there on fees that could be collected on this thing, but again, that's a one-time, you institute a fee, you pick up $1 million, and then that fee's there forever, because there's an expense on the other side of it. Just something else to point out is water and sewer, very heavily subsidized here in Burlington by the taxes. We have probably the lowest average water sewer bill combination within 128 in the MWRA district. You know, ours is a $400 combination for the average water sewer user. There's many communities that the resident will pay $1,800 to $2,000 a year for water and sewer as well. So that's also something that's getting picked up on the tax bill. There are different models. We could charge the full cost of making water and sewer in a separate enterprise fund, so the water rates would go through the roof. We'd have more tax money to spend on different services. But again, there's a million different ways to do it that we've been continuing on with the track that the town has always done, where, you know, we try to give everybody what they need, not necessarily what they want, and there's a goal to try to keep fees to a minimum, continue to subsidize water and sewer. It's tax deductible on your tax bill theoretically, whereas a water sewer bill is not. That was always a select board directive. And again, we do try to maintain a modest tax increase if possible on the residents. So that's what we work with internally here. So when we present the guidelines that were presented, you know, we're working really hard to try to make all those things work together. And again, it's going to be a tight year, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we're in just a tremendous position, as Sonia indicated. In other towns, they're figuring out who's getting laid off on an annual basis. And we're able to maintain staffing, maintain our services, and so we got to tighten our belts this year. And it's going to be difficult for us, but we want to. You know, we want to keep the system working as it is.
It's huge, actually. I mean, I think if you don't go from community to community, or if you're not stepping into other communities and seeing their fees, you know, they've worked in other communities, those of us who like go into other communities for work and then kind of compare for people, it's huge what Burlington gives their resident base, and sometimes it feels not so much that way because we've lived here for years or we've been doing this for years, but it's pretty significant what the administration can deliver here, and I mean, it doesn't feel comfortable per se to think that we're going to be level funding some things, but you guys should be commended for that, because honestly, it would be easy for you to come in and say, we need this in order to level fund, and it would be easy for us to say, that's what we should do, because that's what we do at Burlington. You know what I mean? So I feel like this is going to be a good test on, you know, can we in fact tighten our belts, but still deliver what we need to deliver? And if the answer is no, then we'll know what we need to do next year.
Brett?
Thank you. So, boy, 10 years ago, I would not have asked this kind of question on camera, but I guess times have changed. Coming out of 2008, I think half the committee or so was here back then. Actually, our taxing capacity, I think, had we gone below $1 million on that delta? It had dipped pretty low.
It did. It was probably right around there, Brad, and I was thinking the same thing earlier when we were talking about where it's at now.
So we really kept the tax levy. We self-imposed Prop 2.5. We hadn't hit that, but we self-imposed that for a number of years. And our taxing capacity, that number grew pretty rapidly to the point where I remember you and I had a conversation of, gee, maybe are we not taxing enough? You know, Burlington's growing and we weren't taxing enough to support the growth there. So the question I'm going to ask is, we're now up to what, 13 million on that delta. If you use that as a rule of how are we doing our job, have we been increasing the tax levy sufficiently? Because again, I think Burlington is indeed significantly larger than 15 years or so ago. With that as kind of the measure, are we still a bit, I hate asking, are we still, in a sense, undertaxing even today?
I don't know if I could answer that question. I'm sure you get a different opinion from any resident, you know. That excess capacity fluctuates, so I think it's grown. Again, we did have some really lean years starting in 2008, and we did self-impose, I think it was closer to 3.754% levy increase to sort of hold ourselves accountable to what other towns had for revenue for a few years. And as that's going on, we're also, the economy bounced back. We've created new growth in town, new tax growth. If you can think of all the really great developments that have happened since then, and the rollout of Third Ave and the district. So excess capacity's grown, we're taxing less, and the ability to tax is growing because of those great new developments. And I've told my colleagues this in other towns, that it's really a much harder job to do the budget for all of us, having this capacity and deciding how much of it to use, whereas the majority of our neighbors, they get the proposition 2.5, add 2.5 to last year's levy, figure out how many people added decks on their house, and say, this is how much money we have, new money to work with this year, and then work backwards from there. Whereas we actually have the ability to spend more, and we try to just present a budget that's fair, continues the services we have. But, you know, from our perspective, I don't want to make it sound that, but we don't want to be greedy with it, because the economy fluctuates. We're very dependent upon the economy here. And again, at the end of the day, I do believe that we've always been provided a very generous level of funding. So if we have to tough it out for a year, again, we may have to adjust going forward. We may have to look at, do we need to spend an additional 0.5 point on the levy every year? You know, it's certainly open for discussion, and we're open to have those discussions. But, you know, I always try to remind our department heads that we can't lose sight of the fact that the town is very generous with us in funding our budgets.
Brad, just to add one thing, that when we do our model, 10-year, 5 back, 5 forward, 4 back, 5 forward, that last year, I can tell you right now, says 39,000 in the excess capacity line, but that assumes, you know, a lower new growth. So we spend into the new growth every time. We're going past the 2.5 every year.
Okay.
So that's expecting the levy increase of, say, 5 to 5.5 each year. So when we project out at those numbers, you do spend into it. But that, like I said, that's saying that new growth levels off and becomes more normalized.
Okay, okay, great, thank you.
Chris?
I just want to echo a lot of what Sonia just said, you know, and looking forward, the concerns that I have, not only, yes, I do agree, you know, there are towns that are facing cuts, school budgets facing cuts, but we're going to be looking at ARPA funds ending. Some of the salaries that have been in various boards are either half funded or fully funded there, so we're going to have to look at how we're going to bring those in. We have a lot of big capital budget requests that are going to be coming out through the schools, through the police, that we're going to be facing as well. So I do agree with Sonia that this should be a good exercise at really looking at these, and, you know, where we can increase and should, sure, but also being aware of what's coming down the pike, what's coming down the line. You know, ARPA funding ending, capital budgets coming, and how, while it's great that our revenue is shorter, this is still going to impact our seniors. It's still going to impact our limited income individuals. Any increase is going to impact them, and we always have to have that as one of the driving forces when we make these decisions as well.
It's also a difficult balance. We can't make ourselves uncompetitive from a tax standpoint with the business community either, which is, we know how that relationship works. They're paying 2/3 of the tax levy freight. They're paying a substantial amount in taxes, but we certainly don't want to push that relationship to the point where then it's very uncompetitive, and, you know, taxes are passed through to the companies that want to come here, and it's one of their considerations. And we try to balance out to make sure that we're offering a fair commercial tax rate as well as a very fair residential rate.
Just one, I guess, so thank you very much for this presentation, John. Next time, let's do it before the budget. Yeah, we got a lot of challenges, and I appreciate all the work you guys have done to lay out a plan and know where the hard parts are and where we got to pay attention. Thanks.
Thank you, we really appreciate that. We appreciate your support, we appreciate town meeting support, and overall, the residents are very supportive as well on most things.
Just do a better job.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the exciting approval of the minutes item. All right, I sent out the minutes for January 18. Are there any, which was our most recent meeting, any comments on that? I hadn't received any. Very good.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All right, we do have someone on WebEx, so we're gonna have to do a roll call here. Cheyenne,
Present.
what's that?
Present.
Present. You have to say yes, no, or abstain.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Brad,
Yes.
Chris Campbell,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Chris Delaney,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
chair votes yes. Frank,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Rob,
Abstain.
Ed's not here. Roger,
Yes.
Sonia,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Very good. All right, that's 1301. And let's see, for our next meeting, which will, so we'll be having meetings every Wednesday for a couple months now, so mark that off on your calendars. Next Wednesday will be Conservation, Council of Aging, Legal, Select Board Town Administrator, Accounting, and you're working through HR to reschedule that.
15th may work, either would work for her,
The 15th?
but the 15th, she said
Okay.
we could do it the following week, yeah, 15th.
She would prefer the 15th, I assume?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, 15th or the 22nd, she's
Oh.
fine with either one, so.
Okay, well, we go with the 15th, just so we're not delaying things. All right, so HR was next week, but will be delayed till the 15th. All right, anything else for tonight? All right, I believe that's everything. We'll move on to the adjournment item. We're done.
Where's your hammer?
I don't know.
Budget cuts.
They thought they could stop our meeting by taking the hammer.
I think we defunded it.
They put it on eBay and they dropped it $10.
Hammer, please.